Life Stories invites you into the heart of an unforgettable tale where courage, resilience, and justice collide. Tonight, we follow the journey of Mike Sanders, a former boxing champion seeking peace in a quiet town, only to face a gang of ruthless bikers determined to challenge him. What unfolds is a gripping story of strength, empathy, and profound lessons about standing up against intimidation. As the storm brews and tensions rise, Mike shows that true power lies not just in strength but in self-control and purpose. Subscribe to Life Stories to begin today's incredible journey. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm orange glow over the quiet American town, the hum of an engine broke the stillness. It wasn't an unusual sound. This was the kind of place where motorcycles roared through streets and trucks rumbled by, but this engine carried a different kind of presence. Behind the wheel of a black SUV was Mike Sanders, a man whose name had once been synonymous with strength, determination, and dominance in the boxing world. He was no longer the celebrity whose face adorned magazine covers, nor the warrior celebrated by roaring stadiums. Now, he was simply a man passing through, seeking a moment of peace in a small-town diner. Mike had always preferred simplicity. Dressed in a modest hoodie and jeans, he didn't seek recognition or fanfare. Tonight, his mind was filled with nostalgia. The diner, with its flickering neon sign, had once been the meeting place for him and an old friend during their younger days. Life had pulled them in different directions, but the memories were still vivid, as was his craving for the diner's famous burgers. As Mike parked his car, he was greeted not by the warmth of familiarity but by an uneasy tension in the air. A gang of bikers loitered outside the diner, their laughter loud, their presence commanding. The leader, Buck, was a tall, burly man whose very posture demanded attention. His leather jacket bore patches of his gang, the Iron Wolves, a name that carried weight and fear in these parts. Surrounding him were a handful of men, each one radiating the same air of arrogance and intimidation. From the moment Mike stepped out of his SUV, the atmosphere shifted. The gang's conversation faded, replaced by sharp glances and whispered words. Buck leaned back in his chair, a sly smirk playing on his lips. To them, Mike was an outsider, an intruder in their world. They saw his calm demeanor and modest clothing as weaknesses, unaware of the storm he carried within. Well, Buck drawled, his voice thick with mockery. Looks like we got ourselves a visitor. Don't see many of your kind around here, do we, boys? Laughter erupted from the gang, the kind that carried malice instead of mirth. Mike didn't respond. He wasn't here to prove a point or start trouble. Years ago, he might have risen to the bait, but life had taught him the value of restraint. Keeping his gaze steady, he walked toward the diner, the gang's laughter trailing behind him like an unwanted shadow. Inside, the diner was a haven of warmth and light, a stark contrast to the brewing storm outside. The air smelled of grilled meat and freshly brewed coffee. The waitress, a young woman with kind eyes, greeted Mike with a smile, oblivious to the tension brewing beyond the windows. "Just a burger and a coffee, please," Mike said, his voice soft yet firm. He chose a booth near the window, partly out of habit and partly because it allowed him to keep an eye on his SUV. As he waited for his meal, Mike's thoughts drifted. The town reminded him of his own beginnings. A place where life moved slowly, where people gathered at diners like this to share stories, laughter, and dreams. He remembered his own journey, the battles fought both in and out of the ring. Each scar, each victory, had shaped him, but they had also taken pieces of him along the way. Outside, Buck's gang was far from done. Their laughter had turned into plotting. From their vantage point, Mike's SUV was a symbol of intrusion, its polished surface a stark contrast to their battered bikes. Buck, his face twisting into a sneer, leaned forward and muttered something to his crew. One of them, Tex, a wiry man with slicked back hair, cracked his knuckles and stood, Mike didn't notice Tex until the man's shadow loomed over his booth. "Hey, pal," Tex sneered, his tone dripping with contempt. "Nice car you got out there. Shame if something happened to it." The implicit threat was clear. But Mike remained composed. He met Tex's gaze, his eyes steady and calm. "I'm just here to eat," he replied, his voice low but firm. "Don't start trouble." Tex's smirk faltered for a moment. But the arrogance of his gang bolstered his resolve. He leaned closer, the stench of beer on his breath. "Trouble? Who said anything about trouble?" The air in the diner grew heavy with tension. The waitress, sensing the shift, stepped forward. "Leave him alone," she said, her voice firm despite the slight tremor in her hands. Tex hesitated, his eyes flashing with anger. But he pulled back, muttering curses under his breath as he returned to his gang. Mike watched him go, his expression unreadable. His meal arrived. But the calm he sought had evaporated. Outside, the gang was restless, their voices louder, their intentions clearer. Mike took a deep breath. He had come here seeking peace. But life often had other plans. Tonight, he would once again find himself in a fight, not one for glory or titles, but one that would test the very core of who he had become. Mike finished his meal slowly, trying to savor the food despite the growing sense of unease. The waitress, who had bravely intervened earlier, checked on him with a worried glance. Her name tag read Jenny, and the concern in her eyes suggested she understood more about the gang outside than she let on. "Need anything else?" Jenny asked, her voice barely masking her apprehension. Mike offered her a reassuring smile, shaking his head. "No thank you. It was perfect." Jenny hesitated for a moment, then lowered her voice. "Be careful when you leave. Buck and his guys, they don't take kindly to people who don't play by their rules." Mike appreciated her warning, though it wasn't needed. He had seen men like Buck before, swaggering bullies who relied on fear to assert control. They were dangerous. Yes. But only because they didn't understand their own limitations. And tonight, their limitations were about to be painfully clear. As he rose to leave, Mike glanced out the window. The gang was still there, their laughter replaced by quiet muttering and tense body language. Buck leaned against one of the bikes, his eyes locked on the diner door. His grin was gone, replaced by a look of predatory anticipation. Mike's calm demeanor didn't waver as he walked toward the exit. He knew the storm was coming. But he also knew that showing fear would only feed their arrogance. Jenny's voice called after him softly, "Good luck." Stepping outside, Mike felt the cold evening air hit his face. The gang straightened, their movements synchronized like a pack of wolves preparing to close in on their prey. Buck stepped forward, his leather boots crunching on the gravel. "Leaving so soon?" Buck drawled, his voice carrying a menacing edge. "We thought you might want to stick around. Get to know us a little better." Mike stopped a few feet away from his SUV, his hands casually tucked into his pockets. He turned to face Buck, his gaze steady and unflinching. "I'm just passing through. I don't want any trouble." Buck's lips curled into a mocking smile. "Trouble? Who said anything about trouble? We just want to have a chat. Right, boys?" The gang chuckled, their laughter low and mean. One of them, Tex, the same man who had confronted Mike inside, stepped closer, flexing his fingers as if preparing for a fight. "Yeah, a friendly chat." Mike sighed inwardly. He had given them an out, a chance to let him walk away and avoid what was coming. But he could see it in their eyes now. This wasn't about intimidation anymore. It was about pride, about proving their dominance in front of each other. And that made them dangerous. Buck took another step forward, his voice dropping to a menacing growl. "See, we don't like strangers coming into our town, thinking they're better than us. You parked that fancy car next to our bikes, and we can't let that slide." Mike tilted his head slightly, studying Buck. "You sure you want to do this?" he asked, his tone calm but laced with warning. Buck laughed. A harsh, hollow sound. "What's a guy like you gonna do about it? You don't look like much to me." The rest of the gang closed in, forming a loose circle around Mike. The tension was thick, the air crackling with the unspoken threat of violence. Mike took a slow, measured breath, his body shifting ever so slightly into a ready stance. "I gave you a chance," he said softly, his voice steady and controlled. "But you didn't take it." Buck sneered, raising his arm to signal the others. "Teach him some respect, boys." The gang moved as one, their confidence bolstered by their numbers. But as they surged toward Mike, they would soon discover the truth: they had underestimated the man standing before them. The air in the parking lot seemed to hold its breath as Buck's gang moved in, their footsteps crunching on the gravel with purpose. Mike stood in the center of the circle they had formed, calm and unmoving, like the eye of a storm. He had faced countless challenges in his life, some far more skilled than this unruly gang. But this confrontation was different. This wasn't about fame or titles. It was about survival and the principle of standing against injustice. The first man to charge was Tex, his wiry frame moving quickly as he aimed a wild punch at Mike's face. The gang cheered, confident in their comrade's strength. But Tex's fist never connected. Mike sidestepped effortlessly, his movements smooth and deliberate, before delivering a precise counterpunch to Tex's midsection. The impact was immediate and brutal, sending Tex crumpling to the ground, gasping for air. The cheers from the gang faltered, replaced by stunned silence. Buck's sneer tightened into a grimace. "Get him," he barked, his voice laced with anger. Two more men lunged at Mike, their aggression fueled by adrenaline and pride. Mike reacted with the fluidity of a seasoned fighter, weaving between their attacks with practiced ease. His fists flew like lightning, each strike landing with devastating accuracy. One man stumbled backward, clutching his jaw, while the other hit the ground hard, his breath knocked out by a swift blow to his ribs. The gang's confidence began to waver as they realized this was no ordinary man. Buck, however, refused to back down. He pulled a heavy chain from his back pocket, the metal links gleaming ominously under the dim parking lot lights. "You think you're tough, huh?" he snarled, swinging the chain menacingly. "Let's see how tough you are now." Mike's gaze locked onto Buck, his expression unreadable. He adjusted his stance, his body language calm yet ready. The years of training and discipline coursed through him, and his instincts took over. When Buck swung the chain, Mike moved with precision, stepping inside the arc of the swing. His hand shot out, grabbing Buck's wrist and twisting it sharply. The chain clattered to the ground as Buck let out a pained yell. Before Buck could recover, Mike delivered a controlled but powerful blow to his chest, sending him sprawling. The leader of the gang lay on the ground, coughing and dazed, his bravado extinguished. The remaining gang members hesitated, their earlier aggression replaced by uncertainty. They exchanged nervous glances, the reality of the situation sinking in. One of them muttered, "This guy's a freaking machine." Mike's voice cut through the tension, calm yet commanding. "It's over. Walk away." For a moment, it seemed as if the gang might listen. But Buck, stubborn and humiliated, struggled to his feet, his face twisted in rage. "You don't tell me when it's over," he shouted, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a switchblade. The blade gleamed, a deadly promise in his hands. Mike's eyes narrowed, his focus razor-sharp. This was no longer a simple fight, it had escalated to a dangerous turning point. Yet his calm never wavered. He stepped forward, his movements deliberate, ready to end the confrontation for good. The gang watched in stunned silence, their confidence shattered, as the true power of the man they had underestimated came to light. The storm was far from over, but its outcome was now inevitable. As the sheriff's car disappeared into the night with the battered gang members in tow, the parking lot of the small-town diner grew quiet again. Mike Sanders, calm and composed, stood for a moment, taking in the stillness. The applause from the onlookers faded into the background as he climbed into his SUV. He wasn't looking for praise or recognition, he had simply done what was necessary. Driving away, the glow of the diner's neon sign disappeared in his rearview mirror. Mike reflected on the night's events. Not with anger but with a quiet understanding. Life, he knew, always tested us. And how we responded defined who we were. As the highway stretched ahead of him, he felt a sense of peace return. Justice had been served, and the town could sleep soundly again. Subscribe to Life Stories for more inspiring tales like this one.